a year ago.
I have a hot spot, and it took a while for the hot spot to warm up.
Oh.
Yeah, it was just a warm spot to begin with, huh?
It was just a warm spot. That's right. The Wi-Fi at home is weak, so I need to supplement it.
Oh, okay, excellent. Let me tell you that I invited for this meeting. I invited Abimael Betancourt. Abimael is our Global Ministries intern through this summer. He is helping the Latin American and Caribbean office in different tasks. So just for him, to know how do we work as a partnership, I invited him to his experience. So very probably we will have him joining the conference call.
Okay, wonderful.
I will write him an email saying that we're here. Let me.
There's somebody on the call named Trujillo.
That's me.
That's Mary Lloyd.
Okay, so you're on by phone and by video.
Mary is on both.
Oh, Mary's on both.
Yes.
Okay, great.
I'm in Mexico.
Wow.
All right. What part of Mexico?
I'm in San Miguel de Allende.
Oh, San Miguel de Allende. Okay. Okay.
Right now, Mexico is much happier than Colombia about the World Cup.
Yes. Yes.
Easy, Charlie. Easy.
I'm sorry. I'm cheering for Colombia. That they shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah, big time.
Anyway, Michael, welcome, and Angel, would you like to introduce your Senor Betancourt? We welcome. Bienvenido.
Let me see if he's connected.
He's connected. I see him.
Let me. Where is he? Oh yeah. Okay. Okay. Let me then introduce you to Abimael Betancourt. Abimael Betancourt is our Global Ministries intern for this summer, working in the Latin American Caribbean office, specifically with the Caribbean Initiative and some other tasks. He's a theology student and also a candidate for a pastor, and a very good friend of mine from many years. Are you hearing Abby? Do you hear us, Abby?
Hello.
Abimael, can you speak, please?
This is Marcy.
Hi, Marcy.
Hi, Marcy.
Okay, Abby, I am seeing Abimael, but I don't know if he's.
It sounds like he doesn't. The sound isn't working.
His mic is not working, I think.
You can always, you do what Mary did, which is call in using a phone number.
Yeah. Let me see if he can read the.
He says he can't hear.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that maybe. Oh, okay. Abby, we are seeing you. Do you hear us?
No.
Okay. We hear you, though.
Maybe he can move into my office and then we can be together here.
That's possible. I can also send him.
I already sent him a message, so maybe we can continue our meeting while he come here. Okay, he's still there. But okay, yeah, he's coming here. Okay. Hi, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Angel Luis?
Fine, thank you.
Good.
Okay, so Charlie, you're the boss.
So I'm hoping I can persuade somebody to take notes. I will if I don't find somebody who would like to do that. Are you recording this, Ed?
I am. It's being recorded.
Okay, so perhaps we don't need notes if it's being recorded. We'll just use your recording.
All right.
Thank you very much, by the way, for doing it the last time and for then editing it.
Well, that's you're quite welcome. I enjoy doing that.
Okay. And I'm just going to send to. You could try. I see if he could call. So, what's Mr. Bettencourt's first name again?
Sorry?
Hello.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, Mike Muro. Hi,
Hi there,
Mike.
no.
Hey,
are you?
Mike.
And this is Kate in my office also for the summer.
Hi.
Hi, Kate.
Oh,
Hi,
hi,
Kate.
Kate. We also have an intern in Global Ministries, Abimael Betancourt, and he's right by my side.
Okay.
Hello.
Charlie, I typed in Abimael's first name for you there in the chat portion.
Okay, thank you.
Oh,
So why don't we just, now that Mike's joined us, we have several guests. Let's introduce ourselves, and I'll just go around on the order that I have people on my screen. So I'll begin with Mary in Mexico.
Yes, I'm Mary Olney Lloyd, and I'm co-chair of the Pacific Northwest Committee on Global Ministries. I'm in Mexico until Monday when I return to Seattle.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for joining us. I'm next. I'm Charlie Pillsbury. I'm a member of a UCC church in New Haven, Connecticut, and have for the past number of years helped coordinate the Colombia partnership as we continue to try to expand it and encourage delegations. And I think we've sent delegations in 2011, 2013, 2015, and then a high-level delegation last year in 2017. So, and we're hoping that we can encourage you folks from the Pacific Northwest to consider that, because that form of accompaniment, as we talked about last time, is very important. But why don't we, enough of that, I'll get off my soapbox and turn to Ed. Ed, you're next on my screen.
I'm Ed Evans. I'm a member of the Global Ministries Committee with Mary. For a long time, I was the co-chair with her on that, but I function just as a member right now, and I live in Sequim, Washington, which is way out in the northwest corner of the state of Washington, about 85 miles north and west of Seattle.
Okay. Angel?
hello, buenas tardes. My name is Angel Luis Rivera Agosto. I am the executive for Latin America and the Caribbean here at Global Ministries, living and working in Indianapolis, Indiana, originally from Puerto Rico, and very pleased to be, along with all of you, sharing God's mission in Colombia.
And Michael, you're next.
Michael Joseph. I'm your Global Ministries mission co-worker here in Colombia. I've been here since, in that capacity, 2007. Ordained Baptist minister, member as well of United Church of Christ in Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Michael. And Ruth.
Yes, Ruth Brandon. I'm another member of the Pacific Northwest Committee, and I lived about 20 miles north of Seattle.
Okay. Abimael.
Yes, I don't know if you hear me or somebody hear me.
Do you hear her?
We can hear you.
Well, my name is Abimael. I probably got two. I will help with Angel Luis in the same church for many years. So I come here to Global Ministry for internship summer. Then I'm the student for 9 months in school in my second year. So I can.
So you're currently in seminary.
Yes,
Okay. And where is that?
I'm the in Fremont, California.
Okay. Mike and Kate.
Hi there. I'm Mike Neuroth, policy advocate for international issues for the United Church of Christ Justice and Witness Ministry Office here in Washington, D.C.
And I'm Kate. I am the UCC summer intern.
Welcome, Kate.
And we're hearing a lot of banging around. Folks can mute their line if they're not speaking.
And then I think we have Marcy on the phone. Marcy Gensler. Are you there, Marcy?
Hi, this is Marcy Gansler. I'm the executive for global engagement with Global Ministries, and I'm based in Cleveland.
Okay, great. Generally, with these calls, we like to give Michael an opportunity to give us an update on what's going on, and then I'd like to invite Angel to give us any updates, and also Mike from the Justice and Witness Ministry Office perspective, and then really open it up for discussion and questions. Michael, the floor is yours. I did ask you a question about.
Can I introduce myself? Can anybody hear me? Or
Yeah, Corey. Right.
I'm Cora Trujillo, and I'm a member of the Global Ministries team. I'm from Seattle, Washington.
Okay, so I saw the name, and then Mary said that was her, but it's you, Cora Trujillo.
Yeah. I don't know why it just put my last name.
Cora, can you mute your line when you're not speaking also?
Okay.
We're getting some feedback from your line.
But anyway, welcome, Cora, and you're with the Pacific Northwest Partnership, so welcome. I guess particularly to Mary and Cora, this is their first call. So, and as I mentioned earlier, Ed is recording the call as he did last time. So, in lieu of minutes, we will have a recording on YouTube.
Right.
So, thank you. Go ahead, Michael.
Sure. So I know Charlie asked me to speak a little bit about the presidential elections. We just had the runoff election this past Sunday. And here in Colombia, the reporting on that happens very, very quickly. Within about an hour after the polls close, we pretty much know who has been elected. The runoff came down to the sort of the farthest right-wing candidate and the farthest left-wing candidate of the initial pool of candidates. There were 5 that ran in the first round of the election that didn't pull out before that first round. And Ivan Duque, as Charlie mentioned in his email, was the candidate that won. He was the farthest right-wing candidate, largely seen by many and sort of mentioned often in the press here as sort of a puppet of Álvaro Uribe, who is the former president of Colombia, and is still kind of the most important, most powerful politician in Colombia. Duque won with about a 12 percentage point difference. He got about 54% of the vote to Gustavo Petro's 42%. So, you know, it was a fairly resounding, fairly strong win. But the left wing, the more progressive wing of politics is at least happy with the fact that they got 8 million votes, which is kind of the most a leftist presidential candidate has ever gotten, or at least in recent history in Colombia. So there's a lot to sort of parse there in terms of how we read that presidential election. Certainly we're, in our work, very concerned about what it will mean in terms of the peace accords and the peace processes here in Colombia. Duque previously had been on record saying that he would rip apart the peace accords if he became president. His sort of political boss, we mentioned the former President Uribe, really led the opposition to the peace accords. Over the whole time that they were being negotiated, he was extremely critical of them, and then led the push for folks to vote no, to vote against the peace accords when they came up for referendation in October of 2016. So there's a lot of concerns about that. Duque toned down his rhetoric around it and said by the end in presidential debates that he wouldn't rip them apart, but that he would substantially change them. So there's a lot of speculation about what that will mean. Much of the peace accord, of course, is already codified. It's been passed by Congress as a whole. So that makes it kind of hard for him legally to actually modify them too much. But there are aspects of them that haven't been legislated yet in terms of how you're actually going to do what the two sides agreed to. So there's a lot of concern that he'll be able to use his power as president to sort of kind of be a spoke in the wheel of implementation, just really slow down implementation and bog that down. And that could cause a lot of problems in terms of the peace process being fully implemented here in Colombia, which is extremely concerning for those of us that see the peace process as a very positive thing. It's likely that he's spoken out very clearly against the peace talks that are going on right now with the ELN guerrilla, the second largest guerrilla group, or the largest guerrilla group that's left now. Those peace talks are going on in Havana. He's basically said that in order to continue those talks, the ELN would have to completely demobilize and disarm before talks would take place, which is certainly conditions that they would not likely agree to. They would see that as surrendering first and then negotiating second. So there's a lot of concern right now in terms of all of that. He's likely to get along with the Trump administration on a number of issues. The drug war seems to be the main interest of the Trump administration so far here in Colombia, and incoming President Duque has been very strong on a prohibitionist stance here in Colombia as well. So there's likely going to be a lot of agreement there, and a large emphasis on the drug war, which is concerning as well. As one of the main agreements in the peace accords with the FARC was sort of a much more crop substitution, understanding the drug issue as being an issue of poverty and needed to be addressed through rural development. And it's likely that a Duque administration will not want to implement that sort of strategy. So those are some of the things coming forward. It's hard to know for sure exactly how that's all going to play out. Others have pointed out, that 8 million people voted for the candidate that was very favorable to the peace accords. So there is, a lot of support as well for the peace accords, and what's likely to come down the pike will be a continued political struggle between parts of Colombia that want to see them fully implemented and want to work for peace, and others who seem to actually want to move back to a more aggressive policy of fighting a war against guerrillas. I think I'll leave it there because I don't want to take up too much of our time. But if folks have questions or other things that they're interested in, I'm happy to talk to those.
It sounds to me, Michael.
This is Angel. Can you make a comparative analysis, if that is the case, between those cities or towns or provinces that voted in favor of Gustavo Petro vis-a-vis the ones that voted for Iván Duque? Because as far as I suspect that the provinces that were more directly affected by the war were in favor of Petro, while the cities voted in favor of Duque. But I just want to hear you if that is the case in these last elections.
Yeah, that analysis is by and large correct. I think on if you look at a map of Colombia and where the vote went in the runoff election, the center of the country mostly voted for Duque. The Pacific Coast regions, which is one of those regions that's been heavily affected by the war and is heavily affected by drug trafficking, voted for Petro. A couple of the provinces on the Caribbean coast also voted for Petro. And Bogota, which is in fact obviously the biggest city in Colombia, and almost a quarter of Colombia's population, voted for Petro. And of course, Petro was previously the mayor of the city of Bogota, and he won here. So it was the country's divided. But you're right to say that in the majority of the regions that were most heavily affected by fighting, most heavily affected by the war, did vote for Petro. And analysts, of course, are pointing out that shows that the regions that would be most affected by implementation of the peace accords voted for Petro, voted for those peace accords to be implemented. So there's a strong mandate and clearly will be a social base to fight for the continued implementation of the peace accords moving forward.
I guess am I right in thinking that already you talked about Duque and Trump and the drug war? I think I heard you mention on one of our calls that actually right now the United States has more drug enforcement agents in Colombia than it has State Department diplomats. Is that right?
I don't know about that exact figure, diplomats versus DEA agents. What I have heard folks at the U.S. Embassy say, pretty much off the record, is that the U.S. Embassy here in Bogota is, I believe, the second most staff in that embassy. Mexico has the most, and when asked why, we have so many here in Bogota, and why there's so many in Mexico, they said, that drug war DEA agents was the explanation behind that. That was what those two countries obviously had in common. But I haven't seen an official breakdown, and those are fairly off the record comments.
Sure,
Yep.
So, Angel, is there anything to report on the Caribbean Initiative?
Yes, we are now into the first round of wrapping up the first round of webinars. We have been using webinars as a way of communicating the reality and the work of our partners, as well as the situation, the context where they are having their ministries. So with the last webinar that we held regarding the situation in Venezuela, last Tuesday, we had this webinar regarding the just economic systems, the the experience of Venezuela. Bishop Elida Quevedo from the United Evangelical Pentecostal Church of Venezuela was in charge of as a presenter. So with that webinar, we wrapped up this first round of webinars. Well, that's another one in August 17, Public Witness, Advocacy and Alternatives in Jamaica. Public Witness, Advocacy and Alternatives in Jamaica. It will be a joint venture between the United Church of Jamaica and Cayman Islands and the United Theological Seminary of the Western Indies. So after this webinar on Jamaica, then on September 21st, it is our plan to have a special webinar regarding the International Peace Day. That day, we're celebrating the International Peace Day. And regarding the Caribbean Initiative, it is our proposal to have this special webinar co-sponsored by the Advocacy Office, Rebecca Schultz, the Disciples Peace Fellowship, the UCC Peace Ministries, and the Latin American and Caribbean Office. And the focus of that webinar will be the situation in Colombia. So this is the plan that we have for September 21st. I am in dialogue with our partners in Colombia, so we can have some sort of a follow-up of the situation of the peace accords and some other issue regarding the peace in Colombia after the elections. And at that moment, we will have a better perspective of how the challenges of how the peace accords will be affected or not by the new government in Colombia. So this is a plan. I am still in the process of engaged in conversations with our partners in Colombia, but I want you to be the first to know about this plan, just for you to say the date. This webinar will be held very probably at 11 a.m. but Eastern time, but you will receive a note on the promotion of this webinar. Besides that, we continue sharing different materials. You can check the Bible studies into the Global Ministries webpage. There are some studies, Bible studies regarding the issue of the quest for peace in Colombia. And also, there is a webinar recorded previously regarding the peace accords that you can check in our webpage, www.globalministries.org. I think that's the only thing that I have to report on this afternoon. If you have any questions or comments, I'm very glad to receive them and to answer them.
So I think you maybe answered my question, Angel, but that, in other words, the webinar that focused on Colombia that was, I think, held last November, a link to it is on the Global Ministries website. Is that what you just said?
Yes. There is a previous webinar that we recorded and have available for everybody to check there. And the next webinar on Colombia, the plan is to have it in September 21st.
Right. Okay. Mike, are other questions for Angel before we move on? Well, perhaps we can hear from Mike, and then if Marcy too from Cleveland, we'll cover all UCC and Disciples bases. So,
yeah,
Mike, go ahead from your office in DC.
Sure. Thanks, Charlie. Angel, just to follow up real quick, Angel, excited to hear about that webinar, and I'd be more than happy to co-sponsor and help promote.
Thank you.
For the past few years, we have marked Peace Day and the Sunday before Peace Day as Just Peace Sunday. We've developed kind of some worship materials around Just Peace Sunday over the past couple of years. And we'll be doing so again this summer in preparation for, I think it's September the 16th or 18th is that Sunday. But we'll be 16th, yeah. We'll be encouraging churches to mark that as Just Peace Sunday, but also we can promote the September 21st as Peace Day, and certainly that webinar, if it should come together, focused on Colombia, because there's a lot of points of intersection there. I don't have a whole lot to report on Colombia itself. As you all know, there's a lot happening here in Washington. Kate and I spent the morning protesting family separation issues. We had 50 children in the Russell Senate building who laid down under Mylar blankets to protest the situation of family separation. So we are, DC, as you know, is deeply immersed in this issue right now. So there's a lot of other things going on. But one thing we did do this week on Colombia is we welcomed Jenny Neme to the building and to our office. We had a brown bag lunch for her to kind of brief international policy staff and colleagues here on the situation. This was right before the election, so in many ways, Michael's update is probably more helpful to give everyone an update on kind of the current context now that we know who won the election. The only thing I would add is Jenny, it was the first time I had heard that Jenny is leaving Justo Paz to work for DPAZ. So Michael or Angel, you may know more about that transition, but certainly look forward to continuing to work with her in that context, but sad to have her leadership no longer at Justo Paz. The one thing that from her presentation that stuck out to me really was the struggle for the need to incorporate victims in the political process and in assuring that they get some seats in Congress, that there was this intentional confusion or campaign around trying to make the case that the victims inherently were kind of the pro-Petro side of the election. And so the need to see that victims are incorporated into the political process, that the FARC really have never been incorporated the way they were promised into the political process, and the fact that there still are people being human rights defenders and others being targeted and attacked and killed. Are kind of just a couple of things that struck out to me from her presentation.
Thank you, Mike. I want to welcome Alice Foltz, who's joined us from the Metro DC area. But meanwhile, are there questions for Mike and his presentation? I guess that your presentation did want me to ask you, Michael, whether as part of this election, I know the FARC, as part of the peace accords, were granted representation in the assembly. Has that vote taken place, or was this just a presidential election?
This latest election was just the presidential election. The FARC had run a candidate, initially selected a candidate to run for president, who was the previous top commander of the FARC, known as Rodrigo Londoño's birth name, but more known as Timochenko, which was his nom de guerre. He initially started running for president. He was polling very, very, very low in the polls, and then also had a heart problem and ended up in the hospital, and I think had surgery on his heart, or had some kind of intervention done on his heart. And shortly after that, he pulled out from running for president. So he wasn't, he ended up not being even in the first round. So that's as far as I got in terms of running a candidate for president. Now, what you were also mentioning is that they were in the peace accords guaranteed a minimum of five senators and 5 representatives in the House, and they ran in the congressional elections, which were about 2 months ago, as well. And if they had gotten enough votes for more than 5 seats in either, they would have, had that many seats. And if they got less than that, then they had a minimum of 5 seats guaranteed to them. They ended up getting only about 1% of the vote total, which wasn't enough for a single seat. So they get the 5 seats. They've named the 5 people that should take up office when the new Congress is installed next month.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Mike? Marcy, if you have something you'd like to add from the global engagement perspective?
I'm kind of sitting in for Becca Cho. She was really our advocacy person who can't be here because she's in Asia right now. Other than what I work with Angel on the Caribbean Initiative materials, so that's he's pretty much covered that. So that's what I've got. Okay, so Rebecca will join us when she's back from Asia, and it sounded like she's also working closely with Angel on putting together that webinar on September 21st. Yes, that's correct.
Right. Thank you. So this is really an opportunity, particularly for our friends from the Pacific Northwest. So Ed and Ruth were on the call last time. We welcome again Cora and Mary, and want to give you an opportunity because you're new to this partnership, and we're delighted that you're on the call. If you have some just general questions that have come up between this call and the last call, and or just on this call.
I have some questions. I'm just interested in this crop substitution as a way of, somebody mentioned that there's 2 ways to fight the drug problem. One, kind of a war on drugs, and the other is with promoting crop substitution. And according to the PBS presentation, there's a problem with farmers who are trying to substitute. They're actually being killed. So I'd just like to know more about the crop substitution program as a way to discourage growing of drugs.
Michael?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a complicated issue, and it's an. I mean, I did mention there's sort of these two main approaches, where crop substitution or alternative development or rural development is seen as one option, and then the other would be sort of the war on drugs, which focuses more on forced eradication, just forcibly either aerial spraying of herbicides on drug crops in order to try to kill them, or sending soldiers in essentially to manually rip up drug crops and burn them.
Am I right in thinking that the peace accord focused more on the option that Cora's talking about, the crop substitution and the rural development option?
And who's been president now for 2 terms for 8 years. He has been a champion, kind of get to the root problem here in Colombia, which is that obviously if you have folks living in dire poverty, drugs in the United States and in Europe and elsewhere, then there's going to be people here that are almost essentially forced by economics into growing those crops, which are the only crops that they can make a living off of. So it's only by enabling them to substitute those crops with another crop, an alternative development plan that allows them to substitute it. That would be a much more humane solution and a much more long-term solution, most likely. But yet, what was that, Cora, or I'm not sure who asked the question, or Kate? Anyways, whoever asked her, Cora. Okay, Cora. And what you were getting at is that, yes, I mean, when there are drug trafficking organizations, drug traffickers who have obviously an economic interest in maintaining the drug trade, on a local level in very remote rural communities, sometimes those communities are divided amongst peasants, poor peasants, farmers that want to substitute those crops. They want to move into a legal economy, grow some other type of food stuff and be able to get it to market. And they can come up against drug traffickers that will violently repress them in their attempt to do that. So there's a security component to it as well. So you need funding for the alternative development, for the crop substitution. You need funding for things like roads or other means of getting legal crops to a market. And then you also have the security concerns of how do you protect those rural communities that have largely been under the control of either an illegal armed group or a drug trafficking organization that's kind of the only armed force in that area. So those security challenges are very real for those communities as well. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
Michael, I have a question regarding the coke plantations in Colombia, because there are other places in Latin America, for example, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, where there is a legal coke industry not related to cocaine, not related to drug trafficking. Even in Bolivia, for example, you will find the fight of the coke peasants that have this trade using the coke leaves for tea and for other products that are not related to drug trafficking, because one thing is coke and the other is cocaine. And they are two very different things, How is there some struggle from the coke peasants in Colombia regarding the legal trade of the product?
There is to some degree, not nearly as much as I understand there to be in Bolivia and Peru. The indigenous, populations, as you know, what you're alluding to, in both Bolivia and Peru in particular, have a long tradition of using coca in a non-narcotic way, with teas and chewing it and other things. That's less common here in Colombia. The most indigenous cultures here in Colombia do not don't have the practice of chewing coca or using coca tea very much. So it's not as much of a cultural tradition here. Most of the coca that has been grown here over the last few years has been primarily for the drug trade. My understanding, this is not my area of expertise, but I think even the type of coca that's grown predominantly here in Colombia is more the type that would be used to make it's kind of better for drugs and for cocaine and not as good for chewing or for making coca tea from. But that is one of the things. One of the possibilities for alternative development would be an alternative use to the crop of coca itself, and there is some of that here. There is some tea, coca tea, that's sold here in Colombia, and that would be a possibility. But most of the focus of the alternative development is rather crop substitution, because most of the peasants don't have a traditional tie to coca growing per se.
I have a question. This is Ruth. Has the election turmoil, so to speak, changed what is happening with your efforts in reconciliation and justice and in the communities where that had begun?
Yeah, we just had a meeting this morning with the team from Café Paz, the Café Paz Peace Studies Center that I work with. That's we're working on implementing this reconciliation, transitional justice, and conflict transformation project in two of the FARC communities where ex-FARC fighters, combatants have demobilized. And in fact, we were just now talking about that. We aren't sure what's going to happen to these FARC camps, whether or not they're even going to continue to be viable where they currently are. Our last visit to the camp closest here to Bogota, in Icononso, we asked them if the property that they were on had been bought yet. The Colombian government was supposed to buy the land that they're on. And as of 6 weeks ago, that land still had not been bought. It was only rental land, essentially, which means that they're very, sort of a very unstable situation, and it's unclear with the new administration whether or not, will that be one of those areas where the new administration, does not move forward or starts putting up a bunch of roadblocks in terms of their continuation in those areas. So we're kind of in a holding pattern right now. We've given ourselves another 3 weeks before we try to start implementing any workshops, precisely because of what you're asking about, Ruth, in terms of not being sure that those communities are going to be able to stay where they are. And if they aren't able to stay where they are right now, where will they go, and what shape will that take? Is something we're trying to figure out right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
What has happened to Jesus Santrich? The Jesus Santrich case. I haven't heard anything else from Santrich.
Yeah. So Angel Luis is referring to the Jesus Santrich case. Jesus Santrich was one of the FARC commanders, one of their top peace negotiators in Havana. And geez, 3 months ago, the United States requested him in extradition on grounds that he had been involved in conspiracy to traffic drugs to the United States. So he was arrested here by the Colombian police, but his extradition is sort of in limbo right now. It caused sort of a clash between the traditional legal system in Colombia, which would have probably extradited him, and the special transitional justice court that's been created as a result of the peace accords, which is tasked with trying former FARC combatants for any war crimes or crimes related to the conflict. So it's basically in limbo still, Angel Luis. Colombian Congress right now is debating sort of all the procedures that will, for the functioning of that transitional justice court. The court exists, but all of its procedures for how to handle cases don't exist yet or haven't been codified yet by Colombian Congress. This Congress is supposed to decide on that legislation that was presented by the current president, but now that he's a lame duck president, it's unclear whether or not this current Congress will pass that legislation or will even debate it. The recently elected president, who is currently a senator, has asked for Congress not to debate that legislation. So until he takes office and until the new Congress takes office. So it's in limbo. It's unclear exactly what's going to happen with it. My understanding is, Santrich is still at the Catholic Church's compound where he's being held, and his fate's still sort of up in the air at this point.
I thought I read somewhere that transitional court had blocked his extradition, or has that just been has there been any stay? I mean, you talked about this kind of standoff between the special court and the traditional court system.
Yeah,
What's keeping him in Colombia?
Yeah, so initially the traditional court system looked like they were poised to extradite him. Then the transitional justice court stepped in and said, no, hold on, we have a constitutional right to review the case. You know, the peace accords, which are now Colombian law, give us the right to review that case to ensure that the crimes he committed were committed after the end of the conflict. Because if they were committed during the conflict, then we should try them. If they were committed after the end of the conflict, then he would be in the traditional justice system and would likely be extradited. And that went essentially to the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court affirmed that the special transitional justice court does have the right to review it, but it's in limbo now because the procedure for exactly how they review it is not clear. And that's kind of where it's hanging right now.
Okay, thank you.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. But when we were on the last call, Angel had tried to visit him, as had other clergy. So he's been able to have visitors during this period.
I believe so. I have not. I don't know folks personally that have visited him, but he was, you know, after Angel Luis was here. When Angel Luis was here, at first he was in a regular prison, and then he was transferred on the day that they tried to visit him to a hospital because he was on a hunger strike and his health was very much at risk. Then after that, he was transferred to a Catholic, you know, I don't know exactly what it is, a compound, a monastery, something like that, that belongs to the Catholic Church here in Bogota, and that's where he's currently being held. My understanding is that he's suspended his hunger strike, and so he is eating, and so my understanding is that his health has improved, and that, you know, he is able to receive some visitors there in the Catholic compound.
Thank you. Thanks for that follow-up question on him. Well, we're getting towards the top of the hour, and I'm thinking that maybe we should try to schedule a call, you know, before that webinar on September 21st. But I'd also just be interested to hear from what would be helpful to our four colleagues from the Pacific Northwest. Do you have any thoughts about ongoing calls? I mean, we're grateful for your participation and your questions, and it's an opportunity to gather a great deal of information about what Global Ministries is doing.
Yeah, Charlie. I think right.
So I just throw that out. You know, kind of fit the thought of scheduling a call that would work for, particularly for Michael and for Angel. I know that Mike has asked for kind of a regular time. It's hard for him to schedule. He's very busy in DC, but I've kind of given deference into Angel and Michael as kind of our key participants, and we need to find times that work for their schedule. So, but anyway, again, questions or comments from Mary or Ed or Ruth or Cora?
Thank you. This is Mary. Wasn't on a previous call, so I am catching up and learning a lot. So I appreciate being a part of this. Thank you.
And I guess my question is, I added Ruth and Ed to the distribution list. I'm happy to add you, Mary, and also Cora to the direct distribution list for these calls. I think I just need your email, and maybe I think at one point Ed may have sent me those emails, so I can look through.
Right. My email is my name without spaces or hyphens, maryonlylloyd@gmail.com.
Is that one L in Lloyd?
Correct.
Okay. And Cora?
trujcs1@gmail.com. But I am getting, I think Ed sends me notices of these
Right.
webinars.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm glad to add you directly. You said TRUJ, is that right?
J, yes. C as in Cora, S, and the number 1.
So
At Gmail.
after the C for core, that's the letter S?
Yes.
Okay. And the number 1. All right. But I appreciate your continuing, Ed, to communicate with your network. And also appreciate very much your recording this call. So as those of you who joined the call late, we will not have written minutes, but we'll have recorded minutes,
Right.
thanks to Ed's work. But back to the idea of thinking about our next call, I really turned to Michael and Angel for your thoughts on what would work. Now that we're moving into the summer, mean different things for different people, but
Okay, I will be traveling all of July. I don't know about Michael, but my suggestion would be to reconvene in August, and my
Okay.
proposal would be the 8th of August. Maybe we can move it, I don't know, 2 p.m., but if it's more comfortable to you at 3 p.m., I can do it at 3 p.m. But my proposal would be the 8th of August.
August 8th works fine for me.
okay.
Yeah, it works fine for me.
And how about the time? You said 2 p.m. Eastern time, or 3 p.m. I guess I'd like to turn to our Pacific time people, because the 3 p.m. time means they're more their lunchtime. It might be more, but I don't know what. It may not make a difference whether it's 11 o'clock or noon. So what works for?
I'm retired and I'm wide open.
Okay.
11 or 12 are equal.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, they're fine. Either one is good for me.
Okay. So so then we should go with your first choice on Hill was 2 p.m.
2 p.m., yeah.
And I think that's a Wednesday.
Yeah, it's a Wednesday, August the 8th.
Okay.
So 2 p.m. Eastern, is that right?
2 p.m.
Yeah.
Eastern.
Which will be 1 p.m. here for me.
Are you comfortable with 1 p.m., Michael?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yep.
So on the West Coast, that would be 11
Right.
a.m.?
Mhm.
11 a.m.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
everybody.
Let's give a cheer for the Colombian team. You want so that they can rally and make the elimination round. We hope that they
Sunday at 2 p.m.
Sunday at 2 p.m. Okay.
2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. here. Yeah.
We'll be praying and crossing our fingers.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right.
Bye,
Well,
folks.
thank you all very much.
For your good work, Charlie, and thank you, everybody. May God bless you. Dios le bendiga
All
mucho.
right.
Thank
Okay.
you.
See,
Thanks, Charlie. Bendiciones.
right.
Take care.
All right.
Vaya con Dios.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Adios.
Uh,